This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
Okay, so while the lockdowns are relaxing, the stress and the tensions are still there. Undoubtedly, the last 3 months have taken a huge toll on us all in so many different ways. Ultimately, in some way, that's going to carry through to what's going on in the bedroom. On a good day, relationships do have their ups and downs. And after all the crap that we've been through, we've just added another layer to an already complicated situation for some people. And that's why I knew I had to have back Leah Carey. Now, you may remember our chat last year, back in August. Leah is a sexual communication coach, and she helps people claim their sexual self. She also has a really good podcast. It's called Good Girls Talk About Sex. Yes, we do. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, who would have thought what we'd be going through?
It's been quite a year.
So what has COVID and the lockdown done to relationships and ultimately our sex lives?
This has been so challenging I don't think that there's anybody who has gotten away from how challenging this is, whether it's affecting your work life or your relationship or your children or whatever. Everybody's having a really hard time. Specifically around relationships, around what's going on in the bedroom, there's sort of two main categories that I see. There are people who have been locked down by themselves, or maybe with roommates, but basically no real physical contact, nobody to cuddle with, nobody to sort of share that warm feeling of connection. And that creates one set of issues. And then on the other side, there are people who have locked down with their partner or potentially with an entire family unit and have had way too much togetherness, way too much touch. Women, especially who have young kids, I've been hearing from them about how challenging this has been because they are now the primary outlet for their kids to get the connection and the touch and the communication and all of that stuff that they would often get from teachers and playmates, and all of that is now completely focused on the mom. And so a lot of moms of young kids are in a space right now of being totally over-touched, totally touched out. And then there are people who are, sheltering with their families who maybe didn't have a strong relationship with their partner to begin with. And this has only stressed it even further. So this has been quite an experience for all of us.
Yeah. And it's, I've heard people joke about there's going to be two main outcomes from COVID when it comes to relationships. There's either going to be an increase in birth rate or there's going to be an increase in divorce.
Yeah.
So you're just going to see either you're have plenty of time to get it on and babies are going to come in 9 months, or, what may have been a few cracks a few months ago are now sort of these gaping holes.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so how do you come out of that? Like, how do you even start that conversation? Because, when you're dealing with this, people have a tendency to shut down. And it's just easier to not say anything, not talk about it, because it's not like you can go anywhere and get that space for yourself. You can't go anywhere and have a conversation where, kids or adult children aren't going to hear. So how do you even begin to, turn that corner?
Yeah. Well, one thing, when I hear people talking about divorce as a result of this, um, and we have already seen that in China, the divorce rates have spiked as they are coming out of their lockdown over the last month. Um, One thing I want to say is that these are extraordinary times that we're going under. We are under a level of individual and collective stress and anxiety that is quite unusual. I won't say it's unprecedented, but it's potentially unprecedented in our lifetime. And so if you're in a place where your relationship has started to, like you said, the cracks have become gaping holes, I would encourage you to take a breath before you dive all the way into talking about divorce, because this is a moment that we have no history for. We have no understanding of how to handle this. And so chances are really good that we've all done it badly. And are we going to really punish each other and punish ourselves for not knowing how to handle something we have not learned how to handle? I just want to open the possibility that if you had a relationship that was working for you pre-lockdown, that it's possible that once this crazy time has passed, it might go back to working for you. So, when my mom passed away, and she had been sick for a couple of years, so we had a lot of time to sit and talk. And I was her only child, so like I was going to be the person who did all of the everything with her estate. And one of the things she made me promise was that I wouldn't make any big changes for a year after her death, that I wouldn't quit my job, I wouldn't get married, because I was not in a relationship at the time, that I wouldn't sell her house, that I would take a year to just recover from the intense stress of 2 years of being her companion through the cancer journey. That year was vital to me. If I hadn't taken that time, I think I would have made some really bad decisions. But I took her request very seriously, and I didn't make any decisions for a year. And as a result, when that year came to a close, I was ready to sell her home. I was ready to move on to the next step of my life and my journey. And I'm so grateful to her for putting that in place for me. And I think that I'm not going to say to you, you need to wait a year to figure out what you're going to do with your life. But I do think that there is some real wisdom in giving yourself a moment to take a breath before you make any huge decisions. I definitely want to make a caveat that if you're in a dangerous situation, and we do know that people who were in already tenuous and potentially violent situations, that the domestic violence rates have shot up during this period. If that's what you're in, please get out. There are people who want to support you. There are resources that are hopefully available to you. Please get out. What I'm talking to are the people who've had a relationship that was working for them that seems to have nosedived, and to understand that we are under stress that we don't know how to handle. And if that's the case, then, give yourself a pause before you take any drastic action.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't think of it that way. Um, it's always a hard conversation to have when you're in the midst of something. You don't see things clearly.
Exactly.
And it's almost like what you perceive as reality is somewhat altered.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's just say for the most part, for now, things are sort of coming out of lockdown, and people have maybe more of an opportunity to get out more than just going to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Because that's even an activity that I despise even more now than I did before.
Going to the grocery store was always stressful for me, but now it's like 10 times as stressful.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can't even go there. So how would somebody, if they're in that situation, they had a good relationship
Mm-hmm.
or so-so relationship, and then it just kind of nosedived over the last few months.
Yeah.
How do you, or where do you begin to stop that nosedive? And at least, it may not come back up, but at least, let it plateau and out a little bit so that you can maybe see if there is a recovery mode and sort of an upswing back up.
Yeah. I think part of what happens in relationship communication is that we speak from our places of hurt rather than saying, I am hurt, I am scared, and letting our partner come in and be vulnerable enough to let them join us in that place. We speak from the hurt and the fear, and it ends up sounding like you're not doing this and you don't understand and it's never going to work, and it's all very sort of attacking, rather than sitting down with your partner and saying, I'm really scared. This experience has really shaken me. I'm not sure what it's doing to our relationship. I'm not sure what it's going to look like when, I go back to work and you go back to work and we're both suddenly exposed to all of these people. And, maybe we're nervous about getting sick, or maybe one of us is more nervous than the other about getting sick, or, whatever the situation is. I'm scared. And allowing yourself to have that level of vulnerability with your partner, I absolutely believe is the place to start. We will never get back onto good footing with a partner if what we're saying is, you don't understand and you will never understand.
That's an easy trap to fall into, because
Absolutely.
I have arguments in my head all the time. When you get pissed off with something, next thing you know, you've had this like full-blown 15-minute argument with your own head. And
Yeah.
you're like, what the hell am I doing? But it is, when you do have that conversation in your head, it is, or typically it does focus around blame.
Yes.
And it's really hard to try and, well, first of all, not do that, but also try to understand why the other person may have reacted or behaved that way.
Yeah. Yeah. We are not good in this culture. Now, I'm in the US, you're in Canada. So we have a little bit of difference, but it's still, it's close enough that I feel comfortable making the generalization that in our culture, we have not learned how to have real conversations. We have not learned how to have difficult conversations. What we learn, okay, so basically, those of us who were socialized as little girls learned to not make trouble, to make sure that everybody else is comfortable, to not really ask for our needs to be met, and often to not even know what our needs are. We just know that they're not being met. We don't know what they are. We just know that they're not being met.
But you may, I'm speaking as a woman, but you may not even know that you don't know.
Oh, totally.
It's just like you just may feel this void.
Yeah.
And you have no idea where it's coming from.
It's totally like, I am not satisfied with my life. I know I don't want it to look the way it does, but I don't know what I actually want. I have this conversation with clients all the time. They say, my husband doesn't touch me the way I want him to. I say, that's a fantastic place to start. How do you want him to touch you? And they go, I don't know. Okay, now we have a conversation. So yes, very often we aren't getting what we want, but we don't know what we want, but we don't know that we don't know what we want. So that's how somebody has grown up who's socialized as female. Somebody who grew up socialized as male, who grew up in a little boy body, probably learned that they needed to be tough, to not ask questions, to have the answer all of the time, and to never look weak. So now to put these two people in a room together, and you've got one person who doesn't know what they want. Of course, this is a heteronormative conversation I'm laying out here. But you have one person coming into the room who doesn't know what they want, but knows that they're not satisfied. And we have the other person coming into the room saying, I know exactly what you need, and I'm not going to ask any questions. Neither of those people knows how to communicate with the other person. And I want you to hear that this is not your fault. This is also not your partner's fault. Your partner is not a bad person. Your partner is not uncaring about your, well, I mean, some partners are uncaring about your needs, but assuming that you have a decent person lying in your bed next to you, your partner is not uncaring about your needs. It's just that neither of you learned how to talk about it. And so your dissatisfaction is completely normal, not okay, but in our culture is completely common. And so part of what this COVID experience can do for us, if we allow ourselves to go down this road, is it can help us to start learning how to have these hard conversations. For instance, let's say you and your partner are both going back to work, and one of you has, just to make this easier, I'll use me and my partner as an example. I work from home. So my exposure is extremely low. I basically go to the grocery store. That's it. My partner has been working this whole time. He's a construction carpenter. He's considered an essential worker. So he has been working throughout this pandemic. Now, construction workers usually wear masks, but all of the masks have been diverted to our healthcare workers. So he has been working frequently without any face covering, as have all of his fellow workers. He has a much higher risk exposure than I do. He also works with a bunch of, let's just call a thing. He works with a bunch of 25 to 35-year-old guys who think that they are invincible. And so, like his risk exposure, both because of the equipment circumstances he's in, and because he's working with people whose risk tolerance is much higher, means that when he comes home, he's bringing a whole bunch of stuff in the door with him that I'm not entirely comfortable with. And so we've had to have conversations about, okay, like, what is your risk exposure and what is your risk tolerance? My risk tolerance is kind of medium. I am lucky enough to have a healthy immune system. So I'm not overly concerned that if I got the virus, it would be lethal. But I have a bunch of friends who are immunocompromised or in other ways have lower risk tolerances. And so at such time, I'm sorry, can you hear that outside?
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Life happens.
Okay. So at such time as we all, we start spending time together again, I'm going to have to be making some decisions about whether I am going to carry all of his risk tolerance into a group setting with my friends. Those are conversations we've had to have about, like, what are the risk precautions he's taking right now. In fact, right now he's working out of town, sharing a hotel room with one of his
God.
32-year-old coworkers, and I'm like, well, there's that, like, whatever is going on in that person's home and that person's immune system is coming home to me. I'm not saying that any of this is easy, but we do have an opportunity to start looking at our lives and setting and having these conversations around, what am I comfortable with? And how can we negotiate this in a way that is comfortable for both of us? And that is a great model that we can then carry into negotiations around what we want our sexual activities to look like. It's the same negotiation, just in a different place. There's a woman named Dr. Eveline Dacker. She's a friend of mine, and she has put together sort of this rubric called COVID Cares, and I'll give you the link so you can share it with your audience. And it helps people to understand how to have these conversations. It basically puts people into like cohorts to say, based on your risk tolerance and your risk exposure. And then you can have a conversation with your partner or with friends or whatever about, like, here's where I am. So for me, my risk exposure is very low because I don't leave the house, but it's not completely gone because I have a partner who's out in the world. So I'm sort of in this category that's in the middle of, I'm not completely isolated, but I'm also not all the way out into the world. And then there's the question of my tolerance. And am I willing to have some exposure in order to have friends in my world? And I am. And so being able to look at yourself in terms of, here's what my cohort is. And if you're in a different cohort, are we willing to share exposure that way? And what are the boundaries that we need to put in place? I feel like I'm making this is all sort of theoretical. So let me give you a really.
I was going to say, what does that actually look like if you're having this conversation? So, I mean, if you're having the conversation, I think a lot of people could easily navigate the conversation when it comes to COVID, because I'm going to say there's less maybe emotion attached to it. But if you're talking about sort of bringing that conversation, that negotiation into the bedroom, mm-hmm. there's a lot of emotion attached to that.
There is, absolutely.
So, like, I wouldn't even, like, how would you even start that? Or even the setting is like, you just over coffee is like, hey, just want to talk about this.
So let me give you a concrete example about COVID, and then we'll sort of make the corollary over in terms of sex. So I have a friend who is living with a family member, and they have had an extremely strict quarantine. And her family member has been communicating with a potential partner, or maybe somebody who they'd been dating briefly before COVID happened. And the family member came and said, I'm ready to go have sex again. Like, I have been without touch for the last 3 months. I want to get it on. And my friend was saying, I'm not comfortable with that. We have held a really strict quarantine. This person who she's dating has not had a strict quarantine. But I also don't want to prevent my family member from getting their needs met. And so we looked at it in terms of these boxes, these cohorts. And what I suggested to her is, you get to say to your roommate, to your family member, you get to do with your body what you want to do with your body. However, that puts you in a different cohort than we've been in so far, and I'm not comfortable sharing that risk exposure. So either one of two things needs to happen. If you decide to go forward with this, either we need to have separate places to live so that I can maintain my strict quarantine and you can have the risk exposure that you can have sex. Or if it's possible within our existing family, our existing living space, we need to have much tighter controls over how much exposure we have to each other. So that is putting into place some real specific boundaries. It's not saying you can't do what you want to do. It's saying I support you in doing what you want to do. And here's how I'm going to take care of myself, because I can't share that risk exposure. That's not comfortable for me. So that's how you talk about it in terms of COVID.
That makes sense.
Great. Okay, so now let's talk about being in the bedroom. Your partner comes to you and says, I want to, well, okay, so here's one that is so silly, and yet it comes up so often. It's around body hair. Your partner, yeah. So let's say your partner has stopped shaving. They've been clean shaven, and all of a sudden they've decided.
Oh, you mean like a beard?
Yeah, yes, they have a beard.
Okay. My head was going somewhere else.
Oh, well, we can go there.
My husband did that. No, the beard.
Yeah.
It's like he's got the nicest, I always call it a baby face, but he's decided to grow a beard. And he's had a beard before, and I was like, and now he's gone back to a beard. I'm like, okay, if that's what you want.
Yes. Okay. So your partner has been clean shaven. Now he has a beard or a mustache, and for whatever reason, it's uncomfortable when you're kissing, or it's uncomfortable when he goes down on you. Like, there are some physical experiences that you may not enjoy. You don't get to say, you have to shave your beard. It's his body. Yeah. He gets to do his body however he wants to do his body. So you don't get to say, I require you to change how you do your body. But you do get to say, it makes me physically uncomfortable. When we kiss, I get beard burn. That is uncomfortable for me. So for as long as you have the beard, I'm going to choose not to kiss you. Or I'm going to choose to not let you go down on me. When said that way, it depends obviously on the energy with which it's said, because it could sound like a power move. It could sound like I was going to say
it sounds a bit bitchy.
But I mean, if this is a legitimate issue for you, you have a right to create and hold a boundary. You don't have a right to tell somebody else what to do with their body. It goes the other way as well. It seems that there are a lot of women whose partners are trying to tell them what to do with their own hair down there. And I've been in this position myself, because I have extremely sensitive skin. I cannot shave. I can't go full Brazilian, because I'll just be in pain.
I just don't even get that one. Like, that's just.
So, but I've had partners in the past who have said, that's what I want. Okay. I hear that that's what you want. However, I am not capable of giving that to you. So is that something that you are willing to end a relationship over, or is it something that we can work on together? You know, the one of the compromises I came to with somebody was that I would hand him the clippers, and I would say, you can make it look however you want to make it look, but you cannot shave me all the way down to my skin. Make it as short as you want. And there were moments when that was fun, you know, like it could turn into a game, and there's something buzzy down there. Like, that's not bad.
That's not a bad thing.
So, you know, like there are ways to negotiate things. We don't get to tell other people what to do with their bodies, but we do get to say, here are my boundaries. This is my body, and this is what I'm willing to experience with my body. And so how can we negotiate so that we are both getting our needs met? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, body hair that's the sort of a simpler, you know, for some, it's a simpler one. I mean, for me, it's just, I just love the way his face is without the beard. So it's like, if you want to put on the beard, okay, that's the end of my concern.
Yeah.
But I mean, what if, you know, let's just take that one step further. And what if one of the, you know, somebody in the relationship wants to try something new?
Mm-hmm.
Spice. I mean, I'm going to say, you know, most people have been locked at home. There's no date nights. There's kids there. There's always somebody in the house. So getting alone time.
Yeah.
If things may have gotten a little bit stagnant, they may have dropped off, you know, it may have just with all the stress, people stopped having sex. So what about negotiating for something a little bit spicier?
Sure. So, so there are a bunch of ways you can go about this. One of the things that I love to recommend to people is starting with something called the 3-minute game. And you can find it on my website, Leah Carey.
Isn't that what we used to play in closets when we were kids?
It's a little different.
What was that? So many
7
minutes.
minutes in heaven.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Little different. So the 3-minute game is a way for you to connect with your partner. I especially love it for people who have kids and who don't have a ton of privacy, because you can literally do it in 3-minute chunks. And even if you have toddlers, you can find 3 minutes. So it's very simple. One person lays down and the other person sits next to them and says, how would you like me to touch you for 3 minutes?
Oh, okay.
And then you get to tell them, I want you to stroke my legs. I want you to, and I suggest that when you do it the first time, you keep it PG so that you can both get comfortable with the, you know, with the format.
You don't want to shock your partner by all of a sudden saying, I want you to tie me up.
Right. Like you want to work up to those.
If you've never done that before.
If you've never done it before. Yeah, you want to work up to those things. But it gives you an opportunity to tell your partner exactly what it is you want that you haven't known how to tell them before without hurting their feelings. So if you've been thinking, God, I really, you know, I love it when my partner strokes the sides of my, you know, the sides of my torso, but he doesn't quite touch my breasts the way that I want him to. You can, when he says, how do you want me to touch you for 3 minutes, you can give him extremely specific instructions about how you want him to do that. And assuming that your partner gets it right, you give them tons of positive feedback. You give them all of the positive reinforcement. Like, oh my God, that was exactly, I love it. We've never done that before. It felt so good. Thank you so much. Let's remember that so we can do it again. And then maybe like the next morning, you're like together in the kitchen making omelets, and you go up and you whisper to your partner, I love how you touched me last night. That was so great. So that they like all this positive reinforcement gets really anchored for them. And if you give them the instructions and they're not quite getting it, you're like, oh, you know what? That doesn't feel quite the way I thought it would. Can you try this instead? So you keep it all in the sort of energy of trying something new, and we're exploring together. I'm not telling you all the things you've been doing wrong. I'm inviting you to explore with me. And then at the end of 3 minutes, you switch places and your partner lies down and you say to your partner, how would you like me to touch you for 3 minutes? And then pay attention to what they tell you so that you can repeat those things in the future because they are telling you what they want. There is another half to the exercise. So as to not confuse this, I think I'm only going to give the first half. And then if people want the second half, they can come download it. It's at leahcarey.com/3 minutes. And it's about learning how to receive the kind of touch your partner wants to give. But this way of asking your partner for what you really want is really the beginning of conversations about spicing things up in the bedroom. I highly recommend that you do not go from 0 to 60 in a 3-minute conversation. Build your way up to it so that when you have the conversation, your partner is already bought in. You're not springing something on them out of the blue, because that almost inevitably leads to bad results.
Be like, what the?
Yes, exactly.
Where the hell is that coming from?
Even if your partner would otherwise be interested, it's not unusual for us when we go into a state of, oh, what was that? To immediately go to, oh, hell no. So give your partner some time to join
build up to it.
Yes.
Just gotta build it in there.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Leah, it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Lucy.
Definitely like your idea on having a follow-up conversation on spicing up your sex life. I think we'll definitely have to schedule that. So
Okay.
as Leah mentioned, you can get all of her information on her website, leahcarey.com. I will have the links in the show notes. Her podcast is called Good Girls Talk About Sex. And when you go to her website, be sure to check out the video section. I did watch a few in there today.
Yeah.
There's a couple in there you might want to check out, including what I learned from being naked and blindfolded.
Yes.
Why 2 heads are better than 1. And turn-ons aren't just what happens in the bedroom.
Yes.
Anything else you wanted to share before we finish up?
I mean, I think the thing I always want people to hear is that no matter what it is that you're wanting, you're normal. I get so many questions from people saying, I want this, or I don't want that. Is there something wrong with me? Am I normal? And the answer is yes, you're normal. And whatever it is that you want, there is somebody who wants to have it with you.
Well, there we go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride, ride, ride.